As I've shared before, my name is Doug Johnson, and I'm on the board of the Aviation Community Foundation. And in my day-to-day work, I'm pleased to chair a group here in Colorado called Tiger 21. And if you're familiar with peer learning groups and how they operate, Vistage, YPO, Young Presidents Organization, others, it's really bringing folks around the table just like this and learning from each other, sharing collective intelligence. And so that's what we're going to do in the next 45 minutes is share collective intelligence and really identify those issues and opportunities. Zach really teed this section up very well when he had you list your challenges and your opportunities. And so we're going to identify some of those challenges that we have within our organizations. I'm going to be calling upon you to participate. And then we're going to reach out to our community and look for that collective intelligence to see if we can find some of the solutions or ideas to address this. But before, just as we learned, we jump into the solutions, because when we hear these challenges, we want to, I know exactly what you have to do. Well, we're going to take a step back and we're going to ask some clarifying questions to make sure that the challenge that's been presented is truly the challenge, because there may be something more to it. And so with that, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I am going to call upon three people: Melinda, Brian, and Rob. And so Melinda, if you would come up and maybe speak out to the group this way, I'd ask that you come up, share, again, just remind us of your program, and then share a challenge that has come up in your program. And then we'll stop and we'll ask for some collective intelligence from the group. Would you please come up?
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, we are having a Build-A-Plane group in Washington, D.C. Fantastic group of students, 22, representing 14 different countries from around the globe. We've got kids from Nigeria, Australia, the UK, local Americans, and also what's particularly interesting is that half of the students have some kind of additional need, so like maybe ADHD, they're under the school counsellor, and they're the kids that we were really trying to represent 50% of our programme. As I said, it was very popular. We had 80 people apply. We took 22. It was 20 originally, but we pushed it to 22. In the UK, as I said, I was very involved with 9 builder-planes through the Royal Aeronautical Society, partnered with Boeing, that were very successful. We reached out to the most challenging areas in the UK, so schools from many different demographics. I feel that we're very lucky in DC because the school that we are is a private school. The education, people are paying for the education at $30,000 per student per academic year. However, I don't live in the area that I teach in. I live on the other side of the tracks, which is a very challenging part of DC. My neighbours are Latino, Black, from all over the world, and I'm pleased to say that we're going to partner with a local high school from my own neighbourhood that will be coming on board with the programme as well. One of the challenges that we face is at the moment we don't have a plane. We did have a plane. Well, we thought we had a plane. Build-A-Plane said, we're working with Lynn Freeman, who's the founder of Build-A-Plane, said, we have a lovely one, a Cessna 182. And the gentleman, the donor, signed up and everything. So we went ahead and hosted a big launch in conjunction with the Royal Aeronautical Society at the school. We had 120 people there. Our students presented themselves very, very well to Boeing and other industry leaders, the panel of the Royal Aeronautical Society. And literally 5 days before the plane was due to be transported to us, we got an email saying, I have sold the plane. So we were sadly let down, but it's part of the course. You know, it's horses for courses, and the children are strategically coming up with ideas to overcome this problem. So we've put adverts in Barnstormers, we've go out to airfields and look and say, we call up and say, hey, do you have any old dinosaurs parked up? We'll take it. And we've called scrapyards, aviation scrapyards, to say, do you have anything that you'd like to donate? And I was quite surprised, actually, that nobody has said yes yet, but I remain optimistic. However, as things go, usually maybe a little bit of fate. I've just had a phone call this morning from a lady who was very high up in the Civil Air Patrol. Her daughter and son have called me to say, we have Mary Fikes' aeroplane. She was an engineer. I believe that she overhauled her first engine at the age of 13. And she died, sadly, in June this year. But led many programs through the Civil Air Patrol and Women in Aviation International to create successful leaders and pilots and engineers in the aviation industry. That they would like to, as part of her estate, they'd like to donate her plane to our cause. So we are a non-profit, so we hope that this comes off. I'm meeting with them on Monday, so hopefully we'll have good news. But as a backup, I don't want to be in a position that we were in again, so I'm still very keen to identify a second plane if we can. And also a second plane, we can grow the programme much quicker for the other high school in DC and work together. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we've heard the problem. As we built this program, we thought we had a commitment, and at the last minute, oh, I sold the plane. And so now we're out searching for a plane for the kids to build, and additional planes could help expand and accelerate the program much more quickly. So any clarifying questions around this issue that you would want to know more information about before we jump into potential solutions? Does anybody have a question that this brought up? Yes.
Are the students typically there more than 2 years? I mean, this is a fairly rotating population. So the students are there all 4 years. They're part of an enclave that stays in the States. Okay, that's good.
Any other questions?
So I'm not aware that we've ever had a build a plane at Sterling or anything similar like that. So how would we get that? And it's funny you said that too, because I'm pretty sure Vicky, who works with Mod Aero, she reached out to us before about having a plane that she wanted to donate, but we didn't have, I guess, you to kind of put that process together. So we have the students and possibly have an airplane, but we didn't have the program to do it. So how would we implement that in Houston going forward? I guess that's my question.
Okay, so before we answer that, any more clarifying questions? Oh, back here.
Sure. The airplane that you're looking for, are there any particular characteristics? Small, medium, large, flying, not flying?
So going back to the first question, I believe it starts with the best possible volunteers that you can get on board. I actually, this whole thing here in the US came about, I was in McDonald's actually, and believe it or not, I was just waiting for my coffee, and in the queue was a lady next to me, and she had a piece of aviation jewellery on, a brooch that was an aeroplane, and I had my little aeroplane necklace on, and she said to me, "Oh, do you have something to do with aviation here in Washington? Do you work in the aviation industry?" And I said, "No, I'm a teacher at the local school down the road." And we ended up having coffee and a chat. And long story short, she is now my partner in this build a plane. She comes in every week to work with the students, and I found out that she's an air racer, and she built the newest runway. She's an architect. She designed and built the newest runway at Dulles International Airport. So a fantastic resource, and she introduced me to the most wonderful people in the 99s, women in aviation. So it really has excelled from there, really. And I'd say it's all about the people first, students, engaging them, and building up connections within the industry and put in a really, really good program. But listen to the students. You know, the first thing we did, we said, hey, I know this is your program. It's about you learning. You are the future. What do you want? The first thing, of course, they said, well, they would like Captain Sully to come and speak to them. So I did my bit. I did ring up, and was quoted $100,000. I said, oh no, we can go watch it at the IMAX instead. So, but we've facilitated basic aviation course, ground school, in school. We've taken the children to the Air and Space Museum. We had a private tour around there and a photo shoot. We did a launch event, as I said, with the Royal Aeronautical Society, and we secured page 2 at the China Daily. So they did a really lovely half-page write-up about the programme to try and get that out globally, because I believe that we are working with an international group of students, that they're going to take this experience with them to whichever country they go. And also, you know, it's not just America, it's a global problem, having the job spaces available and not the people to fill them. So let's see what we can come up with through these smaller projects like Build a Plane in our home cities and towns. Get the kids on board and moving forward. So that was the first question. The second question, we're very open to what type of aircraft. In our Barnstormers advert, we said, we'd like something like a Cessna, a Piper, preferably non-flyable, that we can restore to a full, fully operating airplane to use as a community aviation product.
Thank you. Any other final clarifying questions?
Hey, Lo, how much space do you have to build the plane?
We've actually hired a hangar at Hyde Airport, which is located 25 minutes drive out of DC, and we bus the students down to the hangar. So at the moment, the students are working on the hangar design, tables, layout, and we just need the aeroplane now.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for the clarifying questions. Now, does anybody have any possible solutions or resources that she may consider?
Some of the things that we've seen, in the general market, and I guess the one thing was I was trying to understand, and Gretchen asked the question, what kind of aircraft are you looking for? Is to understand, I guess, what the mission is. Is it flight training? Is it just experiential for the kids? Is it the actual, hands-on experience of building it? You did mention that, you were looking for something that was fixable. But in terms of resources, some of the things that we've seen out there are home builds. There seems to be a good number of organizations out there, and I'll just throw one out that we've spoken to, which is the Eagle's Nest Project out of, I believe it's McKinney, Texas, and I think it's Randy Butcher, anyway, I'll get you his contact information, but the bottom line is they work with students, work with schools to actually come in, and Van's Aircraft, I believe, donates the aircraft kit, and what they've actually come up with as a model is a sustainable model where the kids in a high school setting actually build the aircraft and sell the aircraft so that they can build another aircraft and then build another 2 aircraft. And not so much that they're trying to industrialize, home building, but it's a great fundraiser, it's a great experiential thing, and, soup to nuts, the kids are learning about so many parts of STEM, and it's fantastic. But there's several groups out there that do that if you're open to, home building and a two-seat, light sport or a two-seat experimental aircraft.
Great. Any other ideas for resources?
This is probably a pretty simple one, but if you check with Mark Baker at AOPA, they're right there in your backyard at Fredericksburg.
Great. Any last call?
I was just going to say that looking at parallels in the market outside of airplanes, but I know like NPR nationally has made a massive campaign of targeting the correct demographic for donation and tax donation. So it's kind of outside of aviation, but whether or not something along those lines, maybe that trade a plane, the demographic that's focused versus maybe another demographic where people aren't looking, in those same places to purchase, but there's obviously anybody who's been a pilot, every airfield has those. So trying to figure out what is the correct way to identify where are those people looking that currently maybe are even out of aviation but are still paying for having an airframe sitting at an air park.
Yeah, that's a suggestion I was going to make as well as your local NPR station. They have a huge campaign underway right now for Donate Your Car. And they also add if you have a boat, motorcycle, plane, they even added plane on there, to contact your local NPR station because they can donate it. So this leads into our fundraising conversation later this afternoon, but partnerships, collaborative partnerships. And so you have such a compelling story of what you're trying to do and background that contacting your local NPR station and asking them if you could coordinate with their development officer, have they ever been approached with anybody who wanted to donate a plane? And NPR can still get the tax benefit from that, but then you actually are the recipient of that aircraft. And so these collaborative partnerships may be a way to go. Great. Any final comments before we move on?
Just thank you very much for all your suggestions.
Great, thank you. Next up, I'd like to invite Brian up. And Brian's with Mod Aero. Just share a little bit more about, just remind us what you're up to, and then a challenge that you're currently facing or that you have faced.
Hello again, I'm Brian Columbus from Mod Aero. Our mission is, the mission statement is engaging, educating, and empowering the next generation of aerospace and aviation. We define that quote-unquote next gen as millennials ages 16 to 39, and we targeted that specific demographic due to the macroeconomic trends that are occurring in aviation. And I sort of referenced this last time with the whole Titanic analogy. The private pilot population is down 30% in the last 15 years. And if you look at any business, any industry that loses 30% of their population, we're not even talking revenue, we're not talking, activity sorties, etc. But their entire population is a systemic decline that can be catastrophic. And when we were starting Mod Aero, we looked at that because we basically saw that the overall pilot decline and the decline in aviation and said, well, what part of that equation do you try to tackle? And in our analysis of looking at the FAA stats as well as other third-party stats, MIT put out I can't remember, 100, 200-page study on the future of aviation based on the past. And it was very clear that without a macroeconomic change in increasing the pilot population, that everybody who's in aviation is going to suffer, whether you're a manufacturer, whether you're in the education space, whether you're in the association space, etc. And all of these problems are systemic of the fact that we're losing our population. That is what has started, the mission that we have and why we focus on this demographic. To talk about the demographic for a moment, 48% of all licensed pilots are between the ages of 16 and 39. Yet, and I don't want this to be controversial, my next statement, but aviation is perceived by the general public as an old white guy sport, an old white guy pleasure, a one percenter, a community, a hobby, a culture that is not inclusive, that is not open. Because of security issues, we fence everything off. We keep people out. Danger, warning, no trespassing all over airports. And that is the perception of general aviation in the public. Now, it's not accurate. It's not true. Everybody in this room is trying to, in many ways, change that. But until we change the perception of the general public, by getting current with the culture and not trying to drag people out to the airport, but try to bring the culture of aviation out to their schools, out to their communities, out to the businesses and leadership that exists, that is how you change the culture. Until that happens, it just doesn't work. And, to talk about, the empathetic thing for a moment in the presentation about why I'm an entrepreneur and why I chose to, focus on a nonprofit. I mean, I don't come from a nonprofit background. I don't come from a professional aviation background. I'm actually a real estate entrepreneur for 16 years. But what I saw was happening when I decided to migrate about 4 or 5 years ago from the commercial real estate industry to aviation, because I was a 15-year-old kid and nobody in my family was a pilot. I just decided I wanted to be a pilot. I looked up at the sky just like so many people who we touch in our organizations collectively. And I was one of those kids that looked up and saw a plane and said, I want to do that. And I don't know how. I don't know what I'm going to need to do it. I just have this reaction and this dream, and I'm going to find a way. And I think, our mission collectively is to help that kid, whoever they are, boy, girl, inner city, suburban, rural, whatever, is to provide them those opportunities to get there. And if we can increase those numbers, so many other crossover opportunities will happen, again, from every part of the industry. But the reason I decided to do what I'm doing from an empathetic standpoint is, and I never really say this publicly, I'm a father of 3 kids, 2 daughters, and a son. 4 years ago, we were living in an upscale, sort of McMansion in suburban Chicago with the best schools and, that whole American dream thing. And it was unrewarding. So my wife and I looked at each other and said, what can we do to raise our children in a more healthy American dream type of environment? And I was, like I said, a pilot since 15. And we packed up our stuff, sold our house, and we moved to an air park. And I didn't even own an airplane at that point. And the reason I do what I do is because I firmly believe, and I go to sleep and I wake up every morning worrying about, is aviation going to be around for my children? My daughter's 11. 4 years from now, she'll be where I was, where that dream happened and led me to, find some of the greatest joys in my life. And whether they're your kids or your grandkids or just, the American population, we can't lose what's special about aviation. We can't lose what drives people to air shows and to community events and that dream, because as we all know as STEM educators, that just being exposed to aviation can lead to so many other opportunities. And so that's really our mission, and that's why I do what I do, and it's not easy. The challenges that we face are abundant. The challenges as a startup that, from a human element, people look at you like you're crazy, like you're trying to be revolutionary, like you're trying to, bust down the doors. The challenges are immense. And, we had the opportunity when we started this to kind of be a grassroots organization and not try to engage with industry that didn't really want to take our calls, that didn't really want to have meetings with us, or suffer through the humiliating, experience of not getting returned phone calls and being looked at like you're crazy and all of those things to get your foot in the door and make it happen. And we decided that in order to enact that macroeconomic change, we had to do that. And to give you an example of the challenges that we face and the industry faces, because it's part of everybody's experience, whether you're, in your mission, whether you're trying to educate young kids or high school kids or adolescents or college kids or provide opportunities in the airlines. The misperception based on the history of aviation, in general aviation specifically, is such that even in our own industry, those perceptions of the rich white guys thing and the culture that exists are very hard to change. When I go to NBAA or I go to, and I'll just give a narrative example, when I go to professional meetings and organizations and I try to pick the brain of, some of the leading industry partners that need to change their outlook, I ask them the question, how much of your book of business if they're insurance or loan portfolio if they're in finance or aircraft sales, what's their customer base? How many of your customers are under the age of 40? And every single time they look at me and go, under 40? What are you talking about? Like, I don't know. I couldn't even calculate. I said, well, think about it for a minute. How many of your customers are under the age of 40? And inevitably, the answer is always single digits. Now, if you've got single-digit market share of an overall aggregate market share of 48% of the population, and your response to that question is, why would we go after them? It's a single-digit thing. It's not a big part of my market. From a business perspective, you're dooming yourself to failure because you're not chasing half the population, half of the potential customers. And until we can change collectively that mindset in leadership to get over what has been and what is, to where do we want to be and how do we want to get there? Collectively, until we can do that, we are going to continue to see this decline. And the biggest challenge that I have is creating partnerships, creating, finding partners and strategy to people that are willing to sit down and look at the numbers, accept them as truth, and willing to admit that, hey, we've done a bad job up till now, but these numbers are so bad that we need to make time in our schedule to go after this market that we've discounted for the last 20 years. And getting people, leaders especially, to change that mindset is incredibly difficult. What it really needs, in my opinion, is, and I don't have the solution exactly, but until more people in the industry at a high level can agree on that and publicly say that and put the concerns of their internal concerns of their organization or their careers or their jobs kind of to the side for a moment, even in a context of a business meeting or a seminar or workshop such as this, until that can be done, to admit that you've got a problem, you're just riding it out. And unfortunately, that's what we're seeing. So my biggest challenge is trying to create that kind of coalition of people that are willing to, take those risks, make those changes, look at their budgets and say, we've really got to make a commitment to this because I may retire in 5 years, but this organization is not going to be around in 5 years if we continue on this downward trend, and accept it as inevitable.
Thank you. Yeah.
It seems like certain enlightened foundations are beginning to understand the problem that you're describing. But why isn't industry, because industry, the airlines, they're making a lot of money now, especially with gas prices lower, and they're giving big pay raises to their pilots and all that. But why aren't they figuring this out and just really coming alongside the entrepreneurs and helping us? Because, it's just so obvious. I was a school superintendent here in Colorado. 1 out of every 3 elementary school kids in Colorado is now Latino. Denver public school system is 73% Latino. I don't understand why industry's not saying, hey, the future is going to be different, You know, it's not going to be all old white males.
In terms of industry, my experience has been that, you know, and I hate making blanket statements, even the ones I just made, but my experience has been that part of that culture is based on the quarterly results of things. So there's this short-sightedness of, hey, what do we need to do to get through this quarter or this year or the next 2 years, or even at a personal level in some leadership, how do I, you know, not screw up this job that I've gotten as the leader? And unfortunately, you know, it takes some real guts to go outside of the organization and say, look, we're not going to do things as we used to do, and we're going to, you know, hack up our budget, and I'm sorry, this is going to have to wait. We need to, as the previous speaker said, buy some options. Buy some options for the future. And, you know, let's face it, aviation is a very small community. We like to agree with our peers. We like to not rock the boat per se, and everybody wants to get along, which are all, you know, positive things. But until we can see the numbers, you know, until what happens at Centennial happens everywhere, you know, and granted not on the large scale of being, you know, number 2 in the country, but until that type of activity accelerates, we're just fighting over the scraps and
Can we invite Oscar Munoz, the CEO of United, to our next meeting?
Sure. Comment.
I guess just to kind of piggyback on that question, I'm a pilot for United Airlines, and I'll call Oscar tomorrow. No, no, but I think the reluctance of the corporations, the airline industry, to have invested it to a certain degree, I think, is in one part profit margin. The airlines in themselves have a very, very slim profit margin. And so, you know, slipping up in an area, or it's a big risk if it doesn't start to pan out. And of course, in our profession, it's a 4 to 5 year process before what you've invested in is actually going to produce a pilot coming through your door as a new hire pilot. So that might be part of it. The other part is that, of course, the increased competition, going from legacy carriers, you know, 20, 30 years ago that were kind of secure just because of their size and the route structure and all that sort of stuff, with the advent of the low-price carrier kind of eating away at certain routes and that sort of thing has kind of created a little bit of anxiety, if you will. Let me stop preaching. But I think it's very important that they do realize this scenario is that, and that's part of the reason why I'm here, is that there's a lot of talent that is very close to a lot of these airlines, major hubs, major cities, and there is a serious need for pilots. I mean, I think we can all identify that need is going to be around for the next 10 to 20 years. And if we don't make the investment now, and if they don't understand that that investment needs to be made now, they might not have a job because there won't be any pilots around to fly their planes.
All right, thank you, Brian. Yeah, we're going to transition to our last group. But before that, how many of you think about yourselves or identify as a digital media company? Okay. How many of you identify as an economic development entity? Okay. And how many of you identify as an education entity? Great. I say that just what we heard and I'll use the example of Silicon Valley as the anti-Wall Street. So we know that Wall Street and the financial district in New York City, kind of the financial capital of the world, and yet we're seeing the money flows in Silicon Valley. Why is that? That's where innovation is happening. And they're disconnected and they invest differently than traditional public investments. And they did that because they wanted to go direct investment. They wanted to identify those opportunities with different structures. And so do we collectively here, and I'm just asking the question, and obviously this can be a rich discussion for this group on an ongoing basis, but do we start looking at ourselves separate or different and bringing the collective digital media experience to get the stories out to the content, to the next generation, the way our customer consumes information today? Do we look at ourselves as education organizations working with different partners? Do we look at ourselves as economic development drivers working with those partners and essentially drive by and smile at 5 miles an hour the aviation industry and say, we're moving forward and we are evolving into the next generation to keep this industry or this dream alive, and we're driving slow enough that you're welcome to jump in the car and ride with us. But we are driving the car and we are moving forward. And disconnect where we're banging our heads against an entity or an organization that doesn't respond. So just a thought. That's what we're seeing in other groups. We've seen it demonstrated very effectively in the financial markets through innovation. And I'm hearing that I'm seeing the collective innovation within all of you to do something different and still be open, attitude of abundance and engagement, but keep moving forward. So last but not least, we've got Rob Williams, Executive Director of the Aerospace Center for Excellence. Rob, if you would share, again, remind everybody what you're up to, and then just share some of the challenges that you're facing and see if we can collectively intelligence some solutions.
Thank you. Rob Williams from the Aerospace Center for Excellence. So, folks, some of the challenges we have is perception. It's a big deal internally and externally as well. So Sun and Fun, the Fly-In, is the largest convention in the state of Florida, annual convention, largest air show in the Southeast. People internally in our community as well as externally throughout the United States and the world do not know that's a fundraiser. It's a fundraiser for year-round educational programs. So that's one of the perceptions we have to overcome is that. We're a not-for-profit. We have over $2.1 million we generate towards educational programming year-round. $400,000 in scholarships we give out to young men and women to learn to fly, airframe and power plant mechanic certifications, avionics. We're also now encompassing more, which I'll get into as far as external UAV programs, focusing on art, aviation art, aerospace art, and the name aerospace itself scares people, to be quite honest with you. Another one of the challenges is, you mentioned the age gap. We have the largest high school flying club, the Lakeland Aero Club. Young men and women between ages of 15 and 18, 85 of them. So if you imagine if you have some of the old guard on there, they're saying, what in the heck are all these kids doing here? You know, they built a great video. They restored airplanes, flew them up to Oshkosh, had a video, and it had AC/DC music in it. So right off the bat, it turned them off. They didn't quite understand what was going on. It's been 3 years, and the advice that they were given is be so good you can't be ignored. And these guys and gals worked hard, cleaned up after themselves, were respectful, and they're thriving part of our community there. It's something to see how they interact and how they represent themselves out there, and they're a credit, you know. So now the old guard, if you will, has come on board slowly. It's a process. It does not happen overnight at all. One of the biggest things I can say is as a pilot, I saw a young man out there changing the oil on an airplane I was going to go fly by himself. He's 17. Normally, I'd have been like, what in the heck are you doing? Get away from that. But I knew he had been trained the right way and how to do that. There'd be the proper procedures and checks in place for that to be a safe airplane. I had absolutely no problem. Walked right by him. I said, hey, how you doing? Knew exactly what was going on there. I had a complete 100% comfort level with that. Talk about taking down fences. As leaders, you're agents of change in your organization. Find a way to say yes. That's the biggest advice I can give you. Somebody comes to you with a crazy idea, find a way to say yes. Sun and Fun Expo Campus generates over $137 million of economic impact on the I-4 corridor. That's between Orlando and Tampa, okay? What we do year round. For instance, while we're here this weekend on our campus, there are about 10,000 zombies on our campus. Well, what does that have to do with flying? Well, it's a facility rental. They come out to our campus, and we're an extension of the community. People that never knew what was going on out there now know. They see the airplanes, they ask questions, and they find out what's happening. Their kids come out and they go to our summer camps. They enroll in our high school, they go to our college. They come back and become good citizens and taxpayers in our community. So that's a cool thing. Another great thing, Monday, I came to Lights and I said, hey, I've got a guy that wants to donate an airplane boat. He didn't say, get out of my office. He said, tell me more. So I told him more. It was one of Howard Hughes's original airplanes. A guy had turned into a boat and had floated it up and down the intercoastal. One of only two in existence, has an exact connection to Howard Hughes, Jimmy Buffett. It's going to be delivered to our campus on Monday. We found a way to make that happen. Lots of the people looked at Lights Now like we had three heads, but we found a way, and this is another way the community is going to find out more. And it's being inclusive also out there. That's another way we're trying to break down that barrier of, a museum. It's an old static. A museum is where things come to die, okay? We've made it into a hands-on learning environment while honoring the past as well in there. So that's one of the other ways we're able to do that, edutainment. That's a fantastic word of what we do out there. It's great. So it has the Jimmy Buffett connection. People maybe that fly don't like Jimmy Buffett, but they come out and they see what's going on. Another perception is the word aerospace, okay? I'll use my wife as an example. She thinks our daughters need to be involved in arts. Okay, that's great. Everybody learns in a different way. I'm a teacher first, served as a director trainer at my airline. Well, how are we going to incorporate that? Well, STEAM is big now. So everything you design out there, designing this aircraft is art. All right, people come in there. We have chopped up airplane parts we took from MRO. They design them to tables on desks that sell for tens of thousands of dollars. Our young men and women at our AMP program are doing that. That's an art. Designing a UAV, that's art. That's something you need to be able to think outside the box of what we're doing here. Another thing I would say we struggle with, which we had a few conversations about this last night, is writing skills. Writing skills for young men and women nowadays are just like they're having a text conversation with people. I'm fortunate enough to be a professor at our local college also, and we have them all write things down. No matter what you do, you're going to need writing skills. So we have a contest we host during the Sun and Fun Fly-In where we have them write an essay. Not only write an essay, anybody can write an essay, but how is it spelled, how is it thought out? And then we interview them one-on-one. What did you think of this? Tell me, why did you choose this? Then you get to really see if they wrote the essay and what they thought about it. Which also helps them develop skills for later on in life, being able to come into a board and explain their decision. They make a boneheaded move with an airplane, coming into the chief pilot's office. What were you thinking? Tell me this. And if you can defend yourself and if safety was first, you're going to be in the clear most of the time. Expanding and thinking outside of the box. Pilots are very tunnel focused, and I can say this because I am one, on flying the plane. Well, we need people to fix them. Airframe and power plant is huge out there. Everybody who works on a NASCAR pit crew, Disney, Busch Gardens, all these places, they hire airframe and power plant mechanics, avionics, UAV. We started our very first UAV club on high school property. So I know what you're talking about with flying in New York. We're very blessed with having great people to work with at the airport and the FAA who managed to let us fly on airport property. So we fly up, right, the kids, some of them go over here and they work on the airplanes, some will go over here and fly, some will go over here and build things. I mean, it's something to see. So those are some of the obstacles we have to overcome as far as the perceptions. And then, of course, everybody knows that there's a pilot shortage. There's an aerospace shortage out there. Well, we have a great story to tell. We all have fantastic stories to tell. We have verifiable results. We have young men and women working in the airlines nowadays, gainfully employed, going to college. The scholarship program we have is phenomenal. Well, none of the news stories want to cover it. Why? Well, the words we've had is it's not sexy enough. That's from the editors. It's not neat enough for us. So that's something we're struggling with. We have a young man, he had an engine failure above a golf course in St. Petersburg, Florida, right out there. Landed the plane safely on a golf course, no injuries, nothing. He did the exact training he was taught to do by his flight instructor. Didn't make the news. That's a good story. I have a young lady, I hired her to work at the front desk, 17 years old, in high school. Worked at the front desk for me. She was determined to be an aerospace engineer. I said, hey, do you want to work? She started coming back to the accounting department, got involved in things there and said, hey, I really like this. I want to get involved in aerospace, accounting part of things. What's happening here? Our controller went on maternity leave. We plugged her at 17 years old to run our AP department. $2.1 million, she's doing that. I mean, that's a fantastic story. That's a resume builder in itself that she can do, but the news doesn't want to cover this. Funding doesn't want to cover this. We feed them the stories. They want the stories written for them. We come to the desk and say, here's a story. That's a great story. It just doesn't like the zing. I mean, so we're struggling with finding what the zing is to be able to get the story out there so they can showcase what all of our programs are doing. Because when one of us succeeds, we all succeed. And finally, the one other challenge I would say is some people view flying as a rich man's profession, okay? So I always view it when I talk to parents as it's a badge of honor, similar to having an Eagle Scout. I struggled for a while. I was a pilot for a long time, and I said, I've been laid off a lot. I had a family. I wanted to try something different with my life. I'd successfully flown people all over the world, opened up airlines everywhere, but nobody looked at a pilot resume like it was anything. I was a bus driver. You know, I could bring a lot to a company. So I was very fortunate, met Lights, and he was able to look at that. And it's something that's very near and dear to me to be able to say, a parent, when you go into a job interview, if you want to have a career in aerospace, that's great, but I want to make sure you're prepared for life. Just like everybody, I was a football coach before. Everybody thinks they're going to be in the NFL, right? Well, there's always a chance you're not, so you need to have a backup plan. If you lose your medical, what are you going to do? What's your backup plan? Get educated and find something else you like in addition to flying. Don't make it your world, make it a part of it. Be something more in the community, volunteer. All pilot resumes look the same. You ask the question, have you had any accidents, incidents, letters of investigation? If you did, what did you learn from them? Other than that, they all look the same. What did you do beyond the cockpit? How are you an asset to your community as a whole? And that's what we teach the young men and women that come to us. They volunteer for us. Yeah, they have hundreds of volunteers out by the time they graduate. Those are just some of the challenges we have out there. I thank the opportunity to be here, too.
Great, thank you. So, yeah, absolutely. Round of applause for all of our folks who contributed today. Thank you. So, questions, response. Does anybody have a question, clarifying question or response to what you just heard?
I know you mentioned you raised $2.1 million in the past year, I guess, from the Senate Fund. Could you clarify approximately how many donors that represents, and what is the mix of the donors on that $2.1 million relating to individuals, corporations, foundations, government?
That's a great question, and we struggle on the donorship part of it. The 2.1 million is mainly generated from facility rentals and from the Sun and Fun fly-in. We also have 2 weeks from now, we have an aerospace discovery weekend where we have about 700 young men and women coming out to learn to fly from summer camps. But we are struggling on the donor side of things. We've been very fortunate to have a large philanthropist who took interest in us, Mr. James Ray, and he has given a sizable contribution towards us, as well as Tom Davis Foundation with Piedmont Airlines. But it's one of those things of being able to be recognized and noticed for what we're doing out there. And then also the cultural shift from us being a spring break for pilots into an educational institution and an asset to the community as a whole.
If I could add to that, Sun and Fun is the fundraising arm, basically. So through facility rentals and having the fly-in, we generate somewhere between $6 and $7 million on an annual basis. All right, through all those activities. The philanthropic support we're just now getting into. We've always been focused on fundraising. There's a difference between fundraising and philanthropic culture. All right. We had that one investor who built a school, gave it to us. We then in turn turned that into a revenue stream by renting it, leasing it to the county, and generated about $400 and some thousand that we turned into scholarships. We've gone out for grants, and we've raised $700,000 in grants. But remember, those are all restricted private foundations. Emil Bueller, the Tom Davis, Publix. And all of them but those are restricted. Those are not operating dollars. Okay, you have to raise operating dollars to manage the 200 acres and 20 employees. But those dollars we had for a specific purpose: building the 727 into a classroom, creating the Aerospace Center for Excellence corridor. All of those were specifically designated for educational purposes. And in the end, though, that culture of philanthropic giving, we're just now embarking on that new part of our lives, if you will, because our philosophy was, you've got to start doing something before anybody will invest in you. So we created the framework and the foundation of a successful 501c3 that was doing something and producing a product. Pilots, engineers, mechanics, dispatchers, showing that we could do it, and then said, okay, now we're doing this. We need your help. So we just built our endowment policies and procedures are solidified, so it protects the money that comes in. That helps create that environment that a giver wants to invest in a solid, mature, long-lasting, with sustainable legs organization.
Have you had any success or developed any relationships with any of the regional airlines? And I'm asking that because today, right now in Houston, ExpressJet is hosting an open house.
Great story there. We actually, when we first came here 3 years ago, we had a career fair we hosted in partnership with an aviation search firm out there. And we have about, 8 to 1,000 people show up during the fly-in. And for me, whoever has been to an aviation career fair here, they charge way too darn much money when you don't have a job or you want to look somewhere else. So what we did was we gave them a ticket to Sun and Fun for the admission costs, and they had to pre-register to come see the airlines that were there. So through that, we built a partnership with ExpressJet, was one of our major partners. And our college down the way, they came by last hiring cycle, and they have a flow-through program with ExpressJet where they look at them, they keep their noses clean, they hire them on board, and they took 7 out of 7 they interviewed out of the Southeast. So I was the only one that took all 100% of all of our people there. So it's something we've been very focused on.
We also team with JetBlue, who's got their JetBlue University right there in Orlando. We're team with them such that they come over and mentor our students in the high school. All of our students go over once or at least twice a year into their facility. They fly their airplanes. They can look at all the job opportunities that exist in the airline industry, so they can see it, everything from working on an airplane to selling tickets to moving bags to whatever suits their fancy. But they get exposed to how you do that at JetBlue University, and then they also have provided grants in the past for us to buy equipment for our AMP program.
This is just a follow-up on your challenge about media. Do you have a digital media strategy? Do you collect everybody's addresses? What's your footprint out in digital media?
Absolutely. We started down that path about 3 years ago and realized that we were not collecting good information. So we brought in volunteers, and they work several hours throughout the day, taking the information that we're gathering from visitors to the Sun and Fun fly-in, and then all the other programs we've now added to our list of events. And so that information is being parlayed back into our social media, the Facebook page, our website. Google Analytics has helped us a lot, figuring out what the right words are to get more information or more participation. We're running about 70,000 people that follow us on Facebook. Our database is about 250,000 people that we do e-blast to, send out e-news to them on a monthly basis. We're trying to create, even though the press won't do the stories, but every time we do a new pilot, we bring them out, get a story, and we flash that out to all of our 250,000 fans out there to get it, and then that is generating more interest and support. So slowly but surely, the ship is turning into the wind here, if you will, as we're getting an understanding that we are a fundraising component of the most important part, which is our education foundation.
If I could give some advice, we talk about changing times with digital media. We have someone that we outsource our digital media to, and their company is fantastic. He has a whole formula on when to post things, when not to post things, how to link things together. So, we give him a story, he feeds it out, he knows when to send it out. And also, when you're doing events, something I've found out here is just by, like we mentioned earlier, observing and watching what the problem is. We used to put posters all around town for events. Well, if you've ever watched a family go into a grocery store, the mom's not worried about looking at a poster. She's making sure her kids don't get run over by a car. But if they have 30 minutes of free time, and we've all done it when we've been in a meeting, checked our Facebook, they have it there. They've got a targeted audience. You know exactly who you're dealing with. If you want to target a 38-year-old pilot, you can find them on social media, and you can pay a very small percentage, get a good, big return on your investment for your social media on that.
Anyone else? Questions, comments?
I'll pick up on the social media one a little bit later today when I talk this afternoon, but I'll tie more to the EAA comment I made earlier. So I've been on the board for a while, but I don't know how many of you are tapped into the EAA, but the mission is very similar to what you're all here to do. It's to grow participation in aviation. And in addition to all the programs they've got a chapter network of over 1,000 chapters around the world. And To the extent you're not tapped into that, I might encourage you to look around and see if there are some in your local area, because there probably are. And they're struggling with the same challenge, right? It's mostly, well, there's two types of chapters. There are the chapters that are mostly a small collection of old white guys sitting around reminiscing about the good old days. And then there's enlightened chapters where they are striving to take advantage of this nucleus of aviation-interested people and desperately trying to bring more kids in particular into that chapter, because they realize they can see where the end is if they don't do that, right? That chapter goes away over a number of years here. And so to the extent you can harness your energy and tap in and both take advantage of as well as help these EAA chapters, I think there's an opportunity to team up. They've got people that know a lot about airplanes. EAA is way more than just about experimental aircraft, even though the E in there is experimental. It's about growing participation in aviation. So you've got a lot of energy around trying to bring the full spectrum of aviation, the flying, the maintenance, the avionics, air traffic control, all these things. And so I guess I just encourage you to look around and see if there are chapters near you. And I would actually interview them, because there are good ones and not so good ones. And the ones that are enlightened and share the same aspirations that you do would be great organizations to team up with. And maybe the last point, to the point earlier, some of them have found a really interesting business model, which is working mostly with vans, with the RV community, getting a kit, teaming up with these typically older folks who know how to build airplanes, with younger folks, typically in high school or maybe a community college, to build the airplane. They may keep it then for flight training, or they'll sell it. And as you said, they'll make money on it and use that to buy the next one and the next one and the next one. And so they've got this momentum, economic engine that's being built that's basically doing all of what we're talking about here today. So I'd encourage you to pursue that avenue as well.
You're absolutely correct. We had a failing EAA chapter in the Lakeland, Florida area, so we teamed with them like we do with everybody that will listen to us, and we gave them an opportunity to be successful. Young Eagle program, it's going on right now, correct? I think it is. All right, so we wanted to fly our high school freshmen to give them an exposure. We call it our orientation week. So we team with EAA chapter, and they fly all of our students. Every single freshman that comes in has an opportunity to fly. So they'll fly between 90 to 100 students over a week's period, and then we also engage them to do our classroom to the sky. So if you can't touch all the students, if you touch 10 teachers, you can touch 1,000 students. So we bring all the teachers out, and the EA chapter now flies those teachers, gives them lesson plans on how to use aerospace as a tool to teach in the classroom, everything from middle school all the way through high school. So using them as an asset has been a tremendous value to us.
And you can also offer in-service points to the teachers. That's a big bonus in the educational community, to be able to come out and get in-service points. You have to contact your local district for the rules and regs with that. But as Lights mentioned, it's a cost-effective solution to get every one of your students up and flying, because the EAA chapters, the Young Eagles flights, will do it for free. So then you can say every one of your students in your high school has flown by the time they've graduated. It's a huge feather in their cap to be able to do that.
One final comment here.
This goes in response to the difficulty of getting some of the major airlines to focus on the go beyond. We recognize the need for pilots in the future, but we don't have the agility or the foresight or the financial resources, et cetera, to do anything about it. We take kids around the country once a year to various sites, and we found a number of wonderful community partners that don't necessarily partner with us because we're not in their local community, but recognize this need and are probably willing to put money towards it. And that can be FedEx. NetJets, our local fixed base operator, has been a terrific support for us. And because these are all sort of the next tier of places that recognize the need for pilots and how they're going to be affected in the next few years, but actually are more grassroots and community oriented, so they're much more willing to reach out and they see the impact too. I think that's a big part of it too, is that it's immediate when they see the kids on their site visiting these places. So yeah, for those of you, especially the smaller organizations, don't overlook the non-major airlines.
Great. Thank you all very much. This is exactly what we would hope would happen with Aviation Community Foundation. This is what I do for Tiger 21. This is the collective intelligence. And as you heard, as we're sharing back and forth, experience, contacts, ideas, please continue this dialogue long after today.